I still remember the first time I came across Joan D'Alessandro's story. It was one of those cases that stopped me in my tracks. A bright-eyed, 7-year-old Girl Scout from Hillsdale, New Jersey, full of life, full of promise. She had a heartwarming innocence that came with her determination to complete a simple task, delivering cookies to her neighbors. It was April 19th, 1973, a crisp spring day, when she left her home carrying that familiar green box of cookies. Her route was familiar. The people she delivered to, known. And Joan? She never came back. The image of a little girl excitedly running door to door is one many of us can imagine. Maybe it reminds you of someone you know, a niece, a daughter, a neighbor. But what happened that day wasn't just heartbreaking. It shook a community to its core and left scars that would remain for decades. The tragedy of Joan D'Alessandro didn't just make headlines. It raised questions about the safety of children, the trust we place in those around us, and how a community could ever heal from such a loss. But what truly stands out about this story isn't just the horror of what happened to Joan. It's what followed. How her mother, Rosemary, refused to let her daughter's name be forgotten. How she channeled unimaginable grief into a relentless fight for justice, not just for Joan, but for countless others. Over the next hour, we'll walk through this story together. You'll hear about the events leading up to that fateful day, the shocking revelations that came to light, and the tireless work that transformed Joan's legacy into a beacon of hope and change. Before we continue, I want you to think about this. What would you do if something so unthinkable happened to someone you loved? Could you find the strength to fight for change? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Because this story isn't just about the past, it's about the power of resilience, advocacy, and community. This is the story of Joan D'Alessandro, and it's one that will stay with you long after you've heard it. April 19th, 1973, started like any other spring day in Hillsdale, New Jersey. Joan D'Alessandro, a spirited 7-year-old with an infectious smile, was determined to finish her Girl Scout cookie deliveries. She had a sense of purpose that morning, her little green sash proudly displaying her merit badges as she bounded out of her family's home with cookies in hand. Her destination was just down the street, her neighbor's house, where Joseph McGowan, a trusted high school science teacher, lived. Joan's family had no reason to worry. This was a close-knit suburban neighborhood where people knew one another, where kids played outside without fear. Her route was short, familiar. Her mother, Rosemary, watched as her daughter left, believing Joan would return in a matter of minutes, just as she always had. But as the minutes turned into an hour, Rosemary began to feel an unease she couldn't explain. She called out for Joan. Nothing. She retraced her daughter's route, checking with other neighbors, asking if they'd seen her. No one had. The community quickly rallied together. Word spread, and by nightfall, neighbors, friends, and even strangers joined the search. Flashlights cut through the darkness as groups combed the streets, calling Joan's name. The Hillsdale Police Department was contacted, and the search expanded to nearby parks, woods, and open fields. Hours stretched into an agonizing night. Rosemary clung to hope, imagining her daughter had wandered off and would be found sleeping under a tree or lost, but safe in someone's yard. But deep down, fear began to creep in. Where could Joan be? As dawn broke, authorities started piecing together the last confirmed sightings. It was determined that Joan had indeed reached Joseph McGowan's door. She was seen standing there, cookies in hand. And then? Nothing. The trail went cold. At this point, I want to ask you, how do we protect children today? What measures do you think can prevent tragedies like this? Share your thoughts in the comments, because as this story unfolds, you'll see how one community's heartbreak led to changes that would save countless lives. But before those changes came, the D'Alessandro family and the Hillsdale community would face a reality more devastating than anyone could have imagined. The early hours of the investigation into Joan D'Alessandro's disappearance were marked by confusion and desperation. With no sign of the 7-year-old, law enforcement intensified their efforts, focusing on those closest to her last known location. As they retraced Joan's steps, one name stood out: Joseph McGowan. McGowan, a 27-year-old high school science teacher, lived just a short distance from the D'Alessandro home. By all appearances, he was an upstanding member of the community, a quiet, educated man who taught chemistry and had no known history of violence. But something didn't sit right with investigators. Joan had been seen at his door that day, delivering cookies. And yet, when asked, McGowan claimed he didn't know what happened after that. Detectives paid McGowan a visit. His demeanor was cooperative, almost overly so. But cracks began to form in his story. He provided vague answers and couldn't account for his time after Joan left his home. Investigators noticed subtle inconsistencies, small details that didn't align with the timeline witnesses had provided. And then there was the matter of his behavior. While the community was consumed by the search for Joan, McGowan seemed detached, disinterested even. The turning point came when law enforcement obtained a search warrant for McGowan's home. Inside, they discovered evidence that left little doubt about what had happened. Traces of blood were found, later confirmed to be Joan's. Items belonging to her were recovered, items that should never have left her possession. Confronted with the mounting evidence, McGowan broke. He confessed to the unthinkable. He had lured Joan inside, sexually assaulted her, and then, in a calculated act of violence, murdered her to cover up his crime. He described how he placed her lifeless body in his car and drove to Harriman State Park in New York, where he discarded her in a remote area. McGowan's confession sent shockwaves through Hillsdale. The trusted neighbor, the teacher who seemed so ordinary, was now revealed as a predator. Joan's family and the community were devastated, grappling with the horrific truth of what had happened to a child who simply wanted to spread kindness through her Girl Scout cookies. The arrest of McGowan brought some answers, but it also raised unsettling questions. How could such evil exist behind the facade of normalcy? How did no one see the warning signs? And perhaps most importantly, how could this have been prevented? As we reflect on this tragic case, I'd like to ask you, how do you think investigative techniques have evolved since the 1970s? Could advancements in technology, forensics, or profiling have made a difference in solving this case sooner? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Joseph McGowan's arrest provided closure to some of the questions surrounding Joan's disappearance. But for her family, the pain was just beginning. And as we'll see in the next chapter, the fight for justice didn't end with his confession. With Joseph McGowan's arrest and confession, the wheels of justice turned toward the trial. For the D'Alessandro family and the Hillsdale community, this was a moment they had awaited with equal parts dread and determination. The trial would not only reveal the horrifying details of Joan's final moments, but also test the strength of a family determined to see justice served. McGowan's defense team approached the case with a predictable strategy. They did not dispute his guilt, but instead sought to portray him as someone who had acted in a moment of irrationality, a man who, they argued, could benefit from treatment rather than harsh punishment. They leaned heavily on his background as a science teacher and his previously clean record, attempting to paint a picture of a man who had simply snapped. But the prosecution had no intention of allowing McGowan's actions to be minimized. They presented a meticulous case, reconstructing the timeline of events using physical evidence, McGowan's own confession, and expert testimony. Witnesses described Joan's innocence and joy on that spring day, contrasted with the calculated brutality of McGowan's actions. One of the most powerful moments of the trial came when forensic experts detailed the evidence found in McGowan's home, tying him irrefutably to the crime. The jury sat in silence as the prosecution painted a chilling picture of premeditation, leaving no doubt that McGowan had not acted impulsively, but had instead made deliberate choices to harm and kill Joan. Rosemary D'Alessandro, Joan's mother, took the stand during the sentencing phase, delivering a heart-wrenching statement about the impact of her daughter's loss. Her words were a reminder that this was not just a legal case. It was the story of a stolen life, a devastated family, and a community forever scarred. After days of testimony and deliberation, the verdict came. Guilty on all counts. Joseph McGowan was sentenced to life in prison, a sentence that reflected the gravity of his crimes. For the D'Alessandro family, the conviction was a measure of justice, but it was far from closure. Rosemary would later describe the sentencing as a moment of accountability, not an end to her grief. The courtroom may have quieted after McGowan's conviction, but the questions it raised still echoed. Could the legal system ever truly deliver justice in cases like these? Was a life sentence enough for the devastation he caused? And now I turn this question to you. What are your thoughts on sentencing in cases like this? Should someone who commits such heinous acts ever be eligible for parole? Let me know in the comments. Your perspectives are important in understanding how society grapples with crimes of this magnitude. The trial and sentencing brought an end to the legal battle. But for Rosemary D'Alessandro, her fight was just beginning. She refused to let Joan's story end there. In the face of unimaginable loss, she channeled her pain into a mission that would change the laws of the nation. Amidst the aftermath of her daughter's horrific murder, one thing became abundantly clear. Rosemary D'Alessandro would not allow her pain to be buried in silence. While the legal system had convicted Joseph McGowan, Rosemary knew that her fight was far from over. She had experienced the unimaginable, but instead of retreating into despair, she became a fierce voice for victims' rights, a mother determined to make sure that Joan's death would not be in vain. In 1993, just 2 decades after McGowan's conviction, a new threat emerged: parole. McGowan, having served a fraction of his life sentence, became eligible for release. For many families of victims, the mere thought of a convicted murderer walking free is a source of terror. For Rosemary, this was a moment that demanded action. With unwavering resolve, she took matters into her own hands. She launched a nationwide letter-writing campaign, rallying others who had been touched by similar tragedies. The goal was simple: prevent McGowan's release. But what began as a small, personal effort rapidly grew into a massive movement, garnering support from victims' families, community leaders, and even strangers who had heard Joan's story. Rosemary's call to action was clear. No child's life should be reduced to a statistic. No murderer who took the life of an innocent child should be allowed to walk free after serving only a fraction of their sentence. Her efforts were tireless. She organized rallies, gathered petitions, and stood before parole boards, each time demanding justice for Joan and for the countless victims who never had a voice. The campaign culminated in a victory that was more than just symbolic. McGowan's parole was denied. But for Rosemary, this was not the end. It was only the beginning of a crusade that would bring about lasting change. In 1997, Rosemary lobbied for the passage of Jones Law in New Jersey, a groundbreaking piece of legislation that denied parole to anyone convicted of murder during the commission of a sex crime. This law was the first of its kind in the state, ensuring that individuals like McGowan would never have the chance to harm another child. But Rosemary wasn't content with just one state's legislation. She took her fight to Washington, D.C., where her advocacy led to the passage of a federal version of Jones Law in 1998, signed into law by President Bill Clinton. The impact of Rosemary's advocacy was profound. Jones' Law became a critical step forward in the fight for victims' rights, helping to create a future where the murderers of children would no longer have the possibility of parole. But Rosemary's work didn't stop there. She tirelessly fought for further reforms to ensure that murderers like McGowan would never see the light of day again. Her resilience in the face of unimaginable loss serves as a powerful reminder that even in the darkest moments, one person can make a difference. Rosemary D'Alessandro's transformation from a grieving mother to a dedicated advocate for justice is nothing short of extraordinary. And now I turn the question to you. What impact do you think individual advocacy can have on legislative change? Can one person's voice really shape the laws that govern us? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, because Rosemary's journey is proof that it can. While Rosemary's advocacy changed the landscape of victims' rights, it was also a personal journey, one that continued long after McGowan's parole hearing. And though he would never be free again, the story didn't end with the passage of the law. Rosemary D'Alessandro's relentless advocacy didn't just end with the passage of Jones' Law in New Jersey. Her impact would extend far beyond the borders of her home state, rippling through the fabric of American law and creating a precedent that would inspire other states to take action in the fight for justice for victims. The passage of Jones' Law in New Jersey was a landmark achievement. It not only ensured that parole would be denied to those who committed murder during a sex crime, but it also set a powerful legal precedent for other states to follow. As news of Rosemary's success spread, victims' families and legal advocates across the country began to rally for similar laws in their own states. The momentum was undeniable. By the time the federal version of Jones' Law was signed into law in 1998, its influence had already been felt nationwide. States began enacting similar legislation, and parole reform became a cornerstone of victims' rights movements across the country. The law not only changed the lives of those who had been victims of sex crimes, but also sent a clear message. When it came to justice for children, there would be no leniency. But Rosemary wasn't done yet. She knew that justice didn't stop with the denial of parole. As she reflected on her own family's fight for justice, she recognized a glaring flaw in the legal system: the statute of limitations. In New Jersey, families had just 2 years from the date of a murder to file a lawsuit against the perpetrator. After that, they could not seek justice in the form of civil compensation, no matter how much time had passed. For Rosemary, this 2-year window seemed insufficient, especially in cases where victims' families struggled to come to terms with their loss or were unaware of legal options in the aftermath of trauma. Determined to change this, she fought to eliminate New Jersey's statute of limitations on suing murderers. Her argument was simple but powerful. Time should never stand between a family and their right to seek justice. Her fight wasn't easy. It required not only legal maneuvering, but also a shift in societal perceptions of justice and victimhood. Rosemary met with lawmakers, testified in hearings, and worked with legal experts to highlight the injustices of such a limited time frame. In 2000, her efforts culminated in a major victory. New Jersey's 2-year statute of limitations was officially eliminated. Families of murder victims could now seek civil justice at any time, no matter how much time had passed. This change had far-reaching implications, as it opened the door for victims' families to seek accountability, even when the legal process seemed out of reach. It sent a clear message to the criminal justice system: the pursuit of justice is not bound by time. And thanks to Rosemary's tireless efforts, it was no longer just about the conviction of a murderer. It was about giving families the chance to fight for the justice they deserved, even when years had gone by. Rosemary's work in both passing Jones' Law and eliminating the statute of limitations has had an undeniable effect on the legal landscape. Her advocacy continues to shape the way we view justice for victims and their families. In a world where legal systems can often feel cold and unyielding, Rosemary's personal journey reminds us that one person's fight can leave an indelible mark on the law. Now, I want to hear from you. What do you think about the importance of legal reforms like these? How crucial is it to ensure that there are no time constraints on seeking justice for victims, no matter how much time has passed? Share your thoughts in the comments, because as Rosemary has proven, individual voices can change the course of history. Joseph McGowan's time in prison was marked by repeated attempts to secure his release. Despite his conviction and life sentence, McGowan remained eligible for parole multiple times over the years. Each time, he was denied. For those who had been touched by the tragedy of Joan D'Alessandro's murder, these parole hearings were a bitter reminder that while the wheels of justice turned, they turned slowly, and they weren't always as final as one might hope. During his time in prison, McGowan was reportedly a model inmate. But for many, his behavior behind bars did not change the fact that he had taken the life of an innocent 7-year-old girl in a senseless and brutal act. It seemed that the systems of correction and rehabilitation had little effect on the irrefutable nature of his crime. Each parole hearing was an emotional moment for Joan's family, especially for Rosemary, who had fought so hard to ensure he would never again walk free. As the years passed, McGowan's repeated parole denials were seen as a testament to the resilience of Joan's family and the laws that Rosemary had worked so tirelessly to create. His attempts to gain release became part of the enduring story of justice delayed but ultimately denied, a story that reaffirmed the importance of victims' voices in the legal process. Finally, on June 5, 2023, Joseph McGowan died in prison. The cause of his death was reported as natural, but for many, it marked the final chapter in a story that had begun over 50 years earlier. McGowan would never again be able to harm anyone. For the D'Alessandro family, McGowan's death did not erase the pain of their loss, nor did it bring Joan back. But it did mark the end of a long fight for justice. For Rosemary, it was a somber moment, a bittersweet conclusion to a battle that had spanned decades. Now, I ask you to reflect on the concept of justice. Was Joseph McGowan's death in prison the ultimate form of justice? Or does true justice lie in the lives lost and the people left behind to carry on? What does justice mean when it's no longer about the punishment, but the people who survive to remember and honor the victims? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments, and let's continue this important conversation. Even in death, Joan D'Alessandro's legacy endures. Her story, while marked by unspeakable tragedy, has spurred real, lasting change in the world. One of the most powerful ways in which Joan's memory lives on is through the foundation established in her name, the Joan Angela D'Alessandro Foundation. Founded by Rosemary D'Alessandro, the foundation was created with one core mission: to promote child safety and provide support for victims of crime. This nonprofit organization works tirelessly to ensure that the lessons learned from Joan's story are not forgotten and that her tragic fate serves as a beacon of change for future generations. The foundation's initiatives are far-reaching. From organizing educational programs in schools to offering resources for families impacted by crime, Joan's Foundation plays a critical role in creating safer environments for children and empowering victims' families. One of its most impactful efforts is the development of resources that help parents, teachers, and communities recognize the signs of potential danger and take proactive steps to protect children. Through partnerships with law enforcement and advocacy groups, the foundation has also been instrumental in pushing for more effective legislation to combat child abuse and sexual violence, continuing the work that Rosemary began when she fought for Joan's Law. It's a testament to the enduring impact of a mother's love and the tireless work of those who fight to make the world a safer place for children. But beyond legislative changes and safety initiatives, the Foundation offers an important space for victims' families to find solace and support. Many of these families are navigating the same devastating emotions that Rosemary faced, and the Foundation helps to ensure they don't have to do so alone. By connecting victims' families with legal aid, mental health professionals, and community resources, the Foundation provides a lifeline to those who need it most. Joan's story may have begun with an unimaginable loss, but it is a story of resilience, transformation, and hope. The foundation named in her honor is a living tribute to her life and to every victim who has faced tragedy and found the strength to advocate for change. As we wrap up this chapter, I ask you, how can communities come together to support victims' families and promote safety? What steps can we take as individuals and as a collective society to prevent another tragedy like Joan's from happening again? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The Joan Angela D'Alessandro Foundation is more than just a memorial. It is a force for good, ensuring that the lessons learned from Joan's life continue to inspire change for generations to come. Joan D'Alessandro's tragic story, though it began with unimaginable pain, has resulted in lasting change that continues to shape the way we protect our children and support victims of crime. Her case, the resulting Joan's Law, and the tireless efforts of her mother, Rosemary, have set the stage for significant shifts in both state and federal laws. Parole reforms, stronger protections for victims, and the elimination of the statute of limitations for suing murderers have all been direct outcomes of their relentless pursuit of justice. These changes have not only altered the course of the legal system, but have also given victims and their families a much stronger voice in the fight for justice. But the impact doesn't end there. Joan's story lives on in the work of the Joan Angela D'Alessandro Foundation, which continues to promote child safety, raise awareness about sexual violence, and provide crucial resources to those who need it most. It is a testament to the power of advocacy and the difference one individual's passion can make in the lives of countless others. It's important to remember, however, that the fight is far from over. While progress has been made, much work still lies ahead. It's on all of us to continue raising our voices, to stay vigilant, and to advocate for policies that protect our children and support victims' families. Through community involvement, education, and legislative action, we can work together to ensure that no more children have to face the kind of tragedy that claimed Joan's life. If you found this story impactful and you're committed to raising awareness, I encourage you to like this video, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel for more in-depth stories like this one. Your voice matters, and together, we can amplify the message of child safety and victims' rights. And if you'd like to learn more about the Joan Angela D'Alessandro Foundation and the incredible work they continue to do, I invite you to visit their website. You can get involved, support their mission, and contribute to the ongoing fight for justice. Let's not let Joan's story be forgotten. Share this video, spread awareness, and continue to fight for a safer world for all children.